Greetings, our Frederick Riddle here with becoming a published author is fun. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, then check out episode 8. This is episode 2528. And I'm putting on here because on my last episode, I invited you to request a free guide that describes the company, the business that I have, and what I offer you. But it also describes, if you read it correctly, it also provides you information on things that you need to know for you to do it yourself. Even if you decide to go it alone and do your own publishing and the whole works, it provides a guide for you, and it's free. That is something I want you to be able to get. And all you got to do is contact me at marketing@trindependentbookstore.com and ask for the free guide. And you'll have to provide me your email address and I will send you a PDF copy of that book. That said, we're going to go into our next issue here. Now, before I do, you'll notice the background here is a little bit different. I've been experimenting, and the books behind me, that's a bookcase I have. And in the past, you've seen it closed. Well, I opened it up, and I kind of like the look that it gives because they are pretty central to my life. And so it gives you little insights into me, but it also just provides a visual background that I think is pleasing, at least on my side. Today's subject, we're going to be talking about thoughts. Now, you can write a book and where you speak as the author and you're describing things. When I first started writing, that's exactly what I started out doing. I started describing the mountains and the different colors that are on there. And I got really poetic in my description. I was really happy. I was patting myself on the back on how good I was doing. Until I came across a statement that said that while that might be good, it is far better for your reader to see all that through the eyes of one or more characters. Now, we're going to emphasize one character here, the primary character. But you can have multiple characters do this, but there's that, and I teach a lesson on that. It requires a little bit more focus on your part and some things you have to be very careful about. But we're going to talk about the primary character here and their thoughts. You can have a conversation with somebody and you never see the thoughts. Or you can see them in which the author provides you a sort of an insight into their thoughts, such as she thought this and she thought that, or she felt this. It's much better if the character themselves, you get a peek into their brain and actually experience their thoughts. And that's what we're talking about. A character's thoughts can, and I've listed a few things here. First of all, they can inform the reader of what's going on. That is something that's needs to be ongoing throughout the book. It's all right to have the author impose some thoughts, but if that author has a choice between his voice or her voice and the character's voice, I would opt to lean towards the character. It just is more effective, and it because the reader is now drawn in to that character's thoughts, into the character itself, himself or herself. And so it informs the reader of what's going on. What is the character seeing? What is the character thinking about the person they're talking about? That can be very revealing. And so it informs the reader, gives them more information than just a straight up monologue. Okay, it provides context. So let's say your primary character had just met with somebody else and been talking, and maybe they were talking about the next character that your primary character meets. And while she's talking to him or her, these are can be either way. Uh, the main primary character goes back to that previous conversation and remembers something, and that helps the reader maintain see the whole thing in context, and that's something you definitely want. You want your reader to see things in context as much as possible. You want to give the reader all the information they need, not too much, but all that they need. So those two are kind of obvious, I would probably think, but necessary to point out to you. Avoid monologue. Now, I referred to that at the very beginning here. You can have two characters talk. Well, for one thing, if you're not having the primary character do some thinking, then and the reader being able to be in the mind and being aware of the thoughts and everything, it's very possible that the reader gets lost in this whole thing. After a while, you say, "Whoa, who's talking?" And so once in a while, it's okay to say, we'll call her Mary Lou. The primary character is Mary Lou. She's talking to Jeff or Jeffrey, either way. We'll go with Jeffrey. And so maybe in her speech, she could say, Jeffrey, that's just not true. Something like that. That helps identify and gives a point of reference to the reader, so that the reader can say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's who's talking now." And if they got lost, that would bring them back. But you don't want them to get lost in the first place. So another thing you can do is in their thoughts, she can think, Jeffrey, I don't think you understand. She's just thinking this. She doesn't say it, but she's thinking it. And that gives you a point of reference. She might think, in the old way of doing it, you would say, Mary Lou thought that he didn't understand. But it's so much more effective when you actually see and read her thoughts. And she says, Jeffrey, you just don't understand. You can almost see her silently shaking her head. It's inside. He doesn't see it, but you do, because you're in her head. And so that is something that is, you want to have them informed, provided in context, and you want to avoid the monologue as much as possible. They're going to have some monologue. And by monologue, I'm referring to two things here. One is the talk between the two people. That's what generally mean. But also, there's times in which you want to describe things. So it's more or less your monologue to the reader, saying, well, this is what's going on and everything. Something that maybe be too difficult to work into the thought patterns and so forth. And so you need to, but I would try to keep that to a minimum. The more you can involve your characters in the story, the better. Now, you might be tempted to say, well, why don't I have both characters thinking and the reader? And the reader be aware. Because there are times in which you can have multiple people thinking, and that creates problems of its own. Even if you have multiple characters thinking, it's not recommended. At least I don't recommend it. And I don't know if anybody does recommend it. It's not recommended that you have them both in the same scene. We'll just call it thinking out loud. As far as the reader is concerned, you're thinking out loud. And that can get very confusing. But when you have just one character thinking out loud, then the reader knows who that character is, and that can that conveys, like I said before, it broadens, it deepens it, and brings color and context to the whole conversation. In cases where you have multiple characters that think, generally speaking, you would have different scenes in which that would, but if you all those characters in the same scene and are all thinking out loud, that can be very, very confusing, not only to you, the author, but to your readers who are reading it. So you got to be very careful. So start out, if you've never done this before, start out with just one character and work with it, experiment with it, and see if I'm not right about using the character's thoughts to describe the scene. Maybe they're seeing the mountains and there are the different shades of purple and stuff of that nature. Maybe Jeffrey is wearing clothes that don't really match. And instead of you saying as an author the clothes didn't match, you get the reaction of the other character, the main character, who's just saying, "Wow, Jeffrey, who dressed you?" Something like that. And it can be it can be something that gives a background to the speech and how you talk to the person and how you understand the person. And it just brings so much context, personality, and different things into play that the story is enriched. And you as the reader, it feels enriched. They when they get done reading that book, they will sit back and say, "Wow, that was really, really good." They may not be able to point to a particular reason why. That's okay. That's not really the purpose of your book. Your purpose of your book is to entertain. It may be to teach something, to promote something or a thought or an action, but it's not for them to necessarily be pointed out unless they're a student and they're looking to learn. And then there's ways you can do that. But the thing is, for the average reader, you want them to have an understanding of all the characters to some degree. And you can see that through the main character. The main character becomes their source of information. Now, the drawback is, if you're doing that, you're usually, if this only takes place if you're doing first person. You can only know as much as the character knows. If you are the author and it's a third person, you might know more, or you would know more actually. But how much you're going to reveal to the reader becomes problematic, because you've already got the reader listening and watching the main character to get the storyline, to get the whole scenario. And so if you impose yourself over that, it can be disruptive. So you want to keep when you do this, you back off, only inserting yourself where it is absolutely necessary. Again, I said it earlier, if you have a choice between your prose and the character's thoughts, lean towards the thoughts, because it is so much better when you can use that tool to reach your reader. The last one I'm talking about here is connect, and there's different ways of looking at this. One is to connect with the reader, which is what we've been talking about all the way through here. But another thing having thoughts does is it connects scenes. Remember, I started out by talking about the primary character was talking to some other character in a previous scene, and now they think back and their thoughts go back to that scene. That's called connecting. You're connecting to previous scenes, other characters, other situations. And so you can use thoughts to help connect and bring all these things together into a total viewpoint. Of course, the reader's only going to see what the main character has seen, what the main character understands. And so you're seeing the whole story unroll to be revealed through that character, and that's good. If you don't want that, then you have to insert yourself more. But I would argue that if you saw possible for them to look through the character, the primary character, to see how things are going, you not only get a view of the primary character, but you also see what's going on with everybody else. Can you have a character who is only a temporary character and you view their thoughts only for a short time? Yes, you can. A book I wrote, and I've referred to this in the past, where you want to hit the reader with some action right at the very beginning of your book. And I talked about, we'll call him Alex. And it sounds something like Alex did not know that in 18 minutes or 15 minutes he would die. In that passage, now that was the author speaking, but in that same passage, we had that character thinking, and the reader followed the thinking. When he died, well, that all died too. It all came to an end. But so for a short period of time, that character dominated, and that character and the reader was able to read the thoughts. That's okay, and that's good, because in that particular scene, that character assumes the role of the primary character. Obviously not going to be the primary character of the whole book. And that's the whole book. The rest of the book is about what happened before that, which I think I read books like that. But this is just an opening scene, and it connected you, the reader, to the story, pulled you in, and then you witnessed the whole thing. That first sentence caught your attention, and 15 minutes later, that character was dead. But in those 15 minutes of that person's last 15 minutes of life provided context that helped the whole story. And so I drew you in, but they provided that basic context, not a whole story or anything like that, just enough context that everything else, it just brought everything else in. And you can also do this, bring a character forward. This whole event could take place maybe in the third chapter, or you bring that up and put that with that little scene in the beginning of the book, and then you go back to the start, and when you get up to the third chapter, you see that scene again, but it's all part of the entire scene itself, an entire chapter perhaps. And so there's different ways you can do this. But the whole thing started with you seeing what they're thinking. And it connected you to the character. And so connecting is very important. That's something you definitely want to happen. The reader and the story connects with the story, connects with the characters, and so forth. I wrote one of the first books I ever wrote. I asked my mother-in-law, I gave her a copy of the book, and she read it, and I asked her who was her favorite character. Now, I thought she was going to go with the primary character. She picked up somebody else, something she connected with, somebody that there was something about that character just that connected with her. And that, when you can get your readers to connect with any of your characters, you have done your job. Because now that reader is going to follow that, as long as that character is somewhere in the story, they're going to be interested. And once that character dies, then you got to, if they pick out that guy who died within 15 minutes, well, now they're going to have to shift or find somebody else to identify with. And that's your job as an author. But basically speaking, If you can connect a reader to any character, my personal preference for me is my main character. That's the one who is my primary connection. But any character that appears in there, they're all my creation. And so you want that reader to connect with at least one of them. Could be more. And that will help convey and carry that reader through the dead spots. Because no matter how you try, how hard you work at, how good your editing is, there are going to be dry spots. The typical story starts like this, and so you start here. Well, you can't see that. That's too low, isn't it? Okay, let's start this. Do this up here. So your story starts up here and goes down. Good chance of it. Or it could. Let's do it this way. It starts here, goes this way. Then it might go down, but then you want to do something. A typical story will then go back up. It might even go up higher, and then down, and then higher, and then down. But a lot of times when books get to the middle, they have quite often they drop way down, and now you got to bring it back up. You've lost all this interest, and this is again where thoughts can help you, because you can have thoughts here that refer back to other things, refer back, and keeps that interest up. And because if it goes down like that, you're going to lose, or you lost all you gained. You got, basically starting all over again, and you don't want to have to do that. So just follow these, experiment with them. You as a author, write it out that way, and then you take the role of the reader and read it and see if that works for you. Like, if you don't like your own stories, then chances are your readers aren't going to like it either. So you want to put yourself in the position of the reader every once in a while and read it, and just read it from the position of somebody who does not know the whole story, only knows what they've read so far. And try to do that and read it and see how it goes. And you don't want that dip, that really big dip. Little dips are going to happen. But the thing is, your thoughts can inform, provide context. You're going to avoid those. A lot of your dead spots happen when you're doing monologue, or you're just don't have any action or anything taking place, and it connects. That is super important, to connect. And if that connection is broken, that's again a time when it's going to dive. And so then you have to reestablish those connection points. So, but do that that's one part of editing, is to reread your book. You might want to take, when you get down to you finish the whole chapter, go back and read that chapter from the viewpoint of the reader and see if there's any weak spots. Mark them off, and then when you get done, go back and make some corrections. And that will help you a lot. So I know I'm giving you a little bit to think about here. So, but that is something that I would encourage you to, if you haven't done it yet, try incorporating thoughts that replace you, so that you are not the one telling the reader how beautiful this person is, how handsome this man is. Let the thoughts of the main character tell you, the reader, what he or she is thinking about that other person. I think you'll discover it's a whole different world. That's it for today. And I want to see you in the next episode. But remember this, Becoming a Published Author is Fun is sponsored by T&R Independent Bookstore. I have a channel called T&R Independent Books. That is on YouTube. And when you subscribe, right down here, right about there, and you subscribe to my channel, you get this podcast. You also get Christian News and Views, where I give you the news and also my opinion. And I keep them separate. Even if I include my opinion in with the news, I try to identify it so that you can see that it is my opinion. I don't. That's totally different the way modern day newspapers do things, or your television, your radio, whatever. And so it's kind of unique in that. And I encourage you to watch it. It gives you news from a Christian viewpoint. And every Thursday, I have a thing called Bible Talk, which is on Christian News and Views. And I go into the Bible. What Bible should you use? I talk about that. I talk about the scriptures themselves. I talk about Jesus. Just recently, I've talked about Good Friday. And so there's different things in which I talk about on Bible Talk. All has to do with the Bible one way or another. And you get all that when you subscribe to my channel. Not only that, you encourage me. And when you encourage me, then I want to inform you, to encourage you, and to inspire you. Those three things. And I try to do that in every episode of either podcast that I'm in. That's it for today, and I'll see you in the next episode.